to this new round of Fagprat with us in NetLife. Today we're going to dive into a field which can be said to be more relevant now than ever. It's the field of inclusive design. Products and services don't work as well for all people of different gender, height, race, skin color, or ability. And this list of products and services just goes longer and longer. And to talk about this today, we have two of our experts on the subject. Frida Støvern did her master thesis, Design with Blindness, at AHO in Oslo, where she did a project with people with visual impairment and their mobility in the city. Mm-hmm. Welcome.
Hello, thank you.
And she's been working here at NetLife as an interaction and service designer for the past year. And the same goes for our service designer, Pankuri Jain, who is also simultaneously pursuing her PhD in design and creative research at Edinburgh Napier University in Scotland. So we're very happy to have you here.
Hello.
Before we start the talk, I just need to say that if you have any questions there back home, you feel free to use the comment section on YouTube, and we'll bring them up at the end. And if we have any technical issues, just hang on and we'll bring you everything back up as fast as we can. So to kick us off, I'll ask you, Frida, could you please start by telling us a little bit about your master thesis, Design with Blindness?
Yes. So when I did my master's, I wanted to look more into using service design and interaction design. I wanted to look more and learn more about UU, universal design. And like as designers, we work so much with visualizations. We visualize complex systems. So I sort of wanted to make that challenge to then work with people with visual impairment to then look at, okay, what does it need to design for this group? So I then decided to work with visual impairment and then mobility in the city. Another reason why I wanted to try this was because of the Norwegian government. They state that universal design should help to create the care services for tomorrow that facilitate for users in greater extent to become a bigger resource in their own life. And that welfare technology should give users better opportunity to master everyday life. So it was important to look at the design aspect and not like think of the technology as the solution, but then use design to map the needs and behaviors.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yes.
And what measures did you take, or what did you do to try and understand what it's like to be visually impaired?
Yes, so when I started with this project, I needed to sort of Google, okay, what was out there and what sort of projects had been done. And it's so many projects out there. It was, I could see that people had made smart mobility canes. They had created navigation apps. But I contacted Blindeforbundet and I started to talk with people that was in this group. Because I couldn't quite understand how it was. And it didn't take that much time before I understood that the problem today is not, or the main pain point is not to explore new places in the city. It's more to, it's the main pain point people often experience is when they are walking around the city and they meet unexpected obstacles, and suddenly they have a city that is unavailable. So it was interesting to see that the need was not that much about navigation. It was much more about orientation. And another thing I looked into was people told me that I should try to be blind for a day. And I should walk around the city with the blindfold. But for me, this felt, I have some sort of problems with this this technique or this method, because I think, of course, it's nice to sort of get an understanding of how it feels like, but if you work with a user group, like people that have visually impairment, it's so much about experience, about technique, and it doesn't end when you take off your blindfold. So it's sort of the thing about being humble and being aware that I don't know that much of how it is to experience this every day, because people have so much knowledge of what they usually experience, and it was so easy to get that knowledge. And you can use so many other methods, like shadowing, bringing people that you're designed for with you in the process, that you are not designing for them, but you are designing with them.
So you kind of included them more in the process instead of like sitting in your lab or your design room making things.
Exactly. So I had weekly meetings with people that I was in this user group. I didn't say that, okay, this is the solution for for your everyday life. It was much more about, okay, how does your day look like, and how, what are you experiencing, and where do you feel unsafe, and or where do you feel that you don't have access, sort of. Because the thing, like when you design for people, that it's not like the diagnosis or the label of that person that decides if they have an if they don't function that well. So it's more like a situation that make people vulnerable, and yeah. So yeah.
And when you told us about your project, I remember some months ago, you had some assumptions about the users before you started that turned out very wrong. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, and I think that's a common mistake that we do, both designers and others, that we have our biases, or we have our based on our knowledge, we think that or assume that people behave some sort of way. So I remember that I assumed that no one in this group would use smartphones. I assumed that they would probably use these old Nokia phones, and everyone would probably read Braille. And that I haven't done that much thought into what it meant being visually impaired, but I assumed that are you blind, then you couldn't see anything. And like all these assumptions was completely wrong. Because I think it's almost about 10% that cannot not see anything, and then you have 90% of this group can see some sort of colors or contrast, and so those are super important design elements that can enhance the experience for a big group within this segmentation. So
there's a. Could you, for all of us, could you, for all of us that don't know what Braille is, just quickly explain?
Yes. Okay. So Braille, it's in Norwegian we call it punktskrift. So it's and the reason why people don't it's not that many that are reading it is because often they get visually impairment based on sickness or genetics or accidents and these sort of things. And as you're getting older, it can be harder to learn how to read it. So a lot of the people that I talked to, they were writing touch on their keyboards, computer keyboards. And the thing with smartphones, I mentioned that earlier, then almost everyone I talked to were using smartphones, and they could read news articles much faster than I could.
Yeah, that's
amazing.
Funny. Now, Pakuri, you've said that the moment you can feel the exclusion the second you're made aware of the consequences. Like, could you please elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I think I started becoming very aware of this idea of exclusion in design when I stepped out of my comfort zone, when I moved away from home 10 years ago and moved away to countries I had never been to before, which I had never traveled to before, all alone, first as a student for my master's, then first work, then back for my PhD. And every time I realized that sometimes things just did not work. Especially when you're in an alien environment, and you need access to the basic everyday um, uh, things in life, like, oh well, opening a bank account, renting a flat, applying for a visa, paying your bills. And every time you move to a new country, it's a new system. But what was like consistent across these systems, public services across countries, whether in the south or the global north, was that most of them did not function. And then I realized I wasn't the dumb user. These services had bias without considering, or at times purposely excluding, my gender, my race, my abilities, my limitations, and so on and so forth. And I was, if I created a unicorn of myself, I would see myself as like a normal functioning user with functioning motor skills and cognitive skills, and someone who has had a specific level of education, who can navigate the world, should be able to navigate the world without too many problems. But that was not the case. um, and then I think during my PhD, I started more on inclusive design, researching more on the topic, and I was able to eventually comprehend, vocalize, articulate, and map these exclusions that are shockingly inherent part of designed services, designed environments, products, and systems. And that is when I became really aware of exclusion in design.
And this feeling of exclusion obviously like leads to the user being left out. But do you think this affects the like business or public organization that design the product or services, or like how does it affect?
I think, well, I could maybe quote some examples and some texts from a very interesting book which has recently come out. Definitely recommend going through it. It's called Building for Everyone. It's been written by some people from Google, written by Annie Jean Baptiste, and it has just come out this year. So definitely check it out. And in the book, Annie immediately tells her readers, that when we encounter products, services, systems like they are not designed for us, it leads to frustration, helplessness, anger, and disappointment. When a product or a service is designed to cater to everyone else's needs but ours, it feels like you've become invisible, or you've been disregarded, and that can be extremely frustrating and isolating. I mean, a very simple, maybe a very rudimentary example would be, if you're an individual who can walk with relative ease, or can walk easily, has functioning physical abilities, and can navigate the world on their legs, and you are walking up and down a staircase. Maybe you're hurrying for work, you're running down the staircase to get out of your building and catch a bus. You will very rarely think about someone who is able to walk. But on the other end of the spectrum, if you're an individual who cannot walk partially or entirely due to whatever physical disability or whatever contextual disability, and you're standing in front of a staircase and you cannot move forward, you immediately are made aware of the fact that this object, this staircase, was not designed for me. And it makes your limitation very, very, it comes into focus. And that is alienating, that is very frustrating. So that is when you realize that, okay, you have completely been excluded. I mean, imagine if like 90% of the websites or mobile apps that we use today just locked us out, were enabled to us for whatever reasons. Call it bad internet, call it terrible technology, or just terrible functionality, and they made them inaccessible, and everyone else is able to access them, but you actually are not. You cannot book your tickets, you cannot pay your bills, you can't pay your taxes, you can't do mobile banking. And you're in a pandemic world, you're living in a post-lockdown world where you cannot engage with people, you cannot talk to them, physically interact with them to solve your problems. So the reliance on technology is 100,000-fold. How would that work? How will you live? And for over 57 million people with like clinically identified disabilities in the US, this is their everyday life. And it is a very scary world to be in if you can't engage in basic services to just live your life. Just because someone did not think of you while designing a product. And that makes it a very important business decision, because if you're a design agency or you're an organization who isn't catering to this, who hasn't designed for everyone, they will let you know. We are living in a world where Twitter has taken over conversations, and everyone, or again, most with access to internet and who have a specific level of digital literacy, can very easily talk about their dissatisfaction and unhappiness online, and they can make the world when things are not designed for them, which is bad for you, which is bad for your business, which is bad for your conscience, and it's just bad business. You are not tapped to a specific market. I hate corporate jargon, but that's what it is. So that's why it's good business and it's good design practice.
Yeah. But how do you recommend them, the designers working there, and ourselves as well? How do you recommend them like incorporating this inclusive mindset in our work to train ourselves as designers and to recognize and reflect on our own biases, because we obviously all have different biases as well?
Yeah, I mean, like exclusion happens when we hope to solve problems while relying and referring to our own biases. As inclusive designers, we need to seek out these exclusions and use them as opportunities to create ideas and inclusive environments. I mean, who are we designing for? If we use our own abilities and biases as a starting point, we end up with products and services designed for people of a specific gender, age, language ability, tech literacy, and physical ability. Those with access to specific time, money, and the social network. What we as a design community need to realize is that when it comes to people, there is no such thing as normal. The products, services, and interactions and technology we design heavily depend on what we can see, we can hear, we can access, we can touch. Assuming all those senses and abilities are fully enabled at that time create the potential to ignore much of the range of humanity. I mean, for an example, there is some interesting work that Microsoft has been doing in inclusive design, and they're the founder of their inclusive design department, Kate Holmes, very famously quoted that design is much more likely to be the source of exclusion than inclusion. And let's not just think of physical disabilities. Let's talk about situational, temporary disabilities. Maybe it's bad weather. Maybe it is a broken hand. Maybe it is a person who's carrying multiple shopping bags and trying to access a staircase. At that specific time, they are partially disabled because of a situation, and they aren't, all their senses aren't functioning to the best of their abilities. And if they have not been considered and they have to access special services or products in that time to help them move forward and they are unable to, that is not their failure as users, that is our failure as designers. So I think it is good. Yeah, it's good to reflect on and like recognize our bias. Do a designer persona of ourselves instead of doing a user persona of someone else. Let's see what biases and assumptions we are working with before we dive into any project.
Yeah. No, I see what you mean. What's your take on this, Frida?
No, I was thinking, like in the end here, that it's actually a quite good practice to, like from my previous project, it was actually much more about exclude everyone normal, if we can say that. And that's an interesting sort of methods to experience with, like trying to look, okay, but what would, this is sort of speculative design, what would the world look like if we had the world was only for visually impaired or for people using wheelchairs, or then you have this sort of different scenarios, and again you are then excluding for other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You had a couple of different routes that we designers can take, Bankuri. to get aware of our own biases and design less excluding products and services.
I think,
Okay.
yeah, sorry.
No. You go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I think there are some methods or like routes that I sort of developed and read more about and started referring to when we started thinking about designing for inclusivity. And one is this idea, this concept of self-reflection as a designer. Um, Designing for inclusivity not only opens up products and services to more people, it also reflects on how people really are, how they work, how they function, being more aware of their surroundings, of our surroundings, being slightly more engaged with the real world. All humans grow and adapt to the world around them, and we want our design work to reflect that. For example, maybe some who are watching this Fagprat right now might have experienced, especially if you live in the global north, you might have experienced trying to type on a phone screen on a cold, foggy winter day when it is humid, cold, it's slightly wet, while and your hands are freezing. There is fog on your screen, and you might be wearing like these touch sensitive gloves, so they should be helping you with accessing any interface on your phone, for example. Um, or you might not have those touch interface gloves, and you might have simple gloves, or you might have to take the gloves out and try to engage technology, and more often than not that interaction will be broken and difficult because your surrounding conditions are not friendly, are not conducive to your interaction. So if we are designing, for example, touch interfaces and surfaces which heavily rely on precision, which heavily rely on time based responses, we have not considered people with limited motor abilities. We have not considered bad weather conditions. We are not considering age related tactile limitations. We are not considering users who engage with interfaces differently than we do. For example, children use interfaces and digital devices very differently from adults because they have a tendency to hold and access the touch screen with multiple fingers, not just with one hand, because they are trying to balance things. When digital natives use faces differently from a digital novice. So, like Frida previously mentioned in this talk, when we assume things, we are designing with bias. So the first thing is to recognize that bias and map it out um, in whatever way possible. The second is solve for one and consider and extend to many. So everyone has abilities and limitations to those abilities, whether physical or cognitive. Designing for people and environments while considering constraints can actually lead to designs that benefit people universally. It's interesting to think that sometimes constraints can be a beautiful thing. They can be a beautiful design question. Uh, I think speaking about Braille, this might be a very interesting. Maybe a lot of you know about this, but very recently came out with their set of Braille bricks for children who are visually impaired. So these bricks are designed with Braille numbers to cater to those who can't see, but they also have written inscribed symbols and letters in English or in whichever language on them for those who are not visually impaired. So by catering to the needs of both, they have designed a seemingly inclusive product. Again, these bricks work with the normal Lego bricks, so they can still be used as a play kit. What would make them completely inclusive, though, because they have been launched by Lego's foundation, which is their not for profit uh, department, which deals with designing material, toys, and toolkits for children for learning to play. And for They design new toolkits and curriculums to bring about the ideology of learning to play with materials, engaging your multiple senses. And these Braille bricks would be entirely inclusive if they were available to everyone, to every organization, to every learning institute who's dealing with the visually impaired, along with their extra reading material and methods which can help children with visual impairment learn through play. Obviously, we don't know to what extent that would happen, but this is a good first step where you can see that where a company as Lego has started to think about extending their competencies and adding more design affordances for children who are at the periphery of their user group, and bringing them in and include an environment which is friendly and conducive to education. Um, Another route would be building a case for empathy and diversity. As discussed initially in this Fagprat, more and more often, especially in recent times, design as a business is seen to be struggling with accessing and being proximate to the needs of the consumer, including people from rural communities, oppressed and lower socioeconomic backgrounds, people from the aging population, people with disabilities, people with LGBTQIA plus communities, and so on and so forth. When dimensions of diversity intersect, for example, if you have a user who's an aged person of color with limited motor skills, just as an example, the challenges to serve their needs and preferences become more nuanced. So, what we need to do as industry and as designers is to hold ourselves and our industry accountable and build a case for empathy and inclusion, where by being inclusive, we are building an environment for everyone. And this work is messy and it's complex and it's frustrating and it's expensive, but it is definitely worth investing time, money, and resources in.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts on this, Frida?
No, it's absolutely good examples with trying to create different products that give value to everyone and not only think of one problem as or one person as this product should be for, but that it's valuable for everyone. It's such a great example.
And you recently did some testing on Norwegian learning materials, Pankuri, which wasn't all impressive.
So we at MetLife work with universal forming or universal design rules, sometimes test materials to check how they can be evaluated on a digital materials, how they can be evaluated on a scale of inclusion and accessibility. So before the summer holidays, some of us from NetLife were tasked with the project of testing around 20 to 22 learning and teaching materials for children, which are currently being developed to help them with homeschooling, especially during the pandemic. So this is a very urgent field that needs help. And we ran some classic accessibility tests on these materials across both desktop and tablet versions. Of course, the fact that these materials are digital and rely on good internet bandwidth and access to hardware, computers, and tablets makes them exclusionary to a level. But even if in a perfect world where kids had access to good internet and good tablets, as material sales, it was shocking and a little heartbreaking to see how a lot of them had just failed to account for accessibility issues and inclusion for children with any kind of visual impairment, cognitive impairment, or motor disabilities. Navigating through some of these materials could be painful and frankly counterproductive. I mean, in 2020, when most of the world has gone digital, how have we to account for children and their educational needs and requirements? How are we getting away with not without considering their anxiety, especially in a post-pandemic world where education has turned a 180 degree, it has undergone a complete makeover where everything is remote and there is so much reliance on the digital world. um, if children are unable to access a learning material in order to their education, that is a big red flag. And we can work towards turning this around. We can work towards making this better. Had their needs, interests, limitations, and ability considered, had those materials been tested and developed with them, like Frida said, instead of for them, especially considering the needs of differently abled children, and then had we undertaken these accessibility tests later, maybe some of them would have worked, and maybe they did do some of that to a certain extent when they were developing these materials, but it clearly wasn't enough.
Yeah, and now it makes me think of the deadline, the 1st of January, where services need to validate on the WCAG 2.1, which is like raising the bar for UU. How do you guys think that will work out for all the Norwegian services?
Maybe I can say something. I think it's going to be a big wake up call, because everyone will have to reevaluate the way their current digital interfaces and websites and intranets and everything designed. And it is a tough, this checklist is quite tough to cater to, but it is definitely a good idea. And I'm in support of reevaluating all your digital services to really check if they're working for the people you've designed for. Have you forgotten anyone? Have you forgotten an entire user group? And this is we are living in a, again, as I said earlier, we are living in a post-pandemic world. It is a very good time to reevaluate everything that we are working on at this moment, especially in terms of usability and accessibility.
And I have one comment as well, because I'm a bit afraid of we talking about UU as this only like a checklist. But like as you are saying, Pankuri, that you are using the insights and then you really connect with, okay, are we not thinking of someone? Is this something that we can do better? And I think that's super important, that we not think of this as only just rules that we have to follow, but actually that we see the value of the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. Do you have any, like, we've had a lot of good questions here, I see, from all the audience, which we'll get to very soon. Do you have any, like, last remarks on how the world should be a better place and start doing more inclusive design sooner rather than later?
So what I'm thinking of is that always ask, are you asking the right questions? We have talked about biases and assumptions, but what's important is that don't think that you know your problem statement right away, because this is tangible and you can work with it when you are or connecting with your insights. And I think a good example is with pianists that have small hands. They actually are victims for poor design sessions. And the reason why is because it's harder to get on a professional level, and they have a lot of more, or they're more prone to joint pains. So we can ask ourselves then, are their hands too small or are the keys too big? And it's a lot of these examples. We have talked a lot about in other conversations about the voice assistants that only listens to men and not that much to women. And it's not because it's harder to design for the voice assistants to listen to both, but it's lack of user involvement. So it's I think that's the main thing with all of this, is it's having more or involve more all sort of users, and not design for them but design with them.
And you, Pankuri, any last words before we go over to the questions?
I think again, like adding to what Frida said, a very good example of failed inclusion for services in the recent has been Snapchat. They have been in the news for all the wrong reasons, because they've not had a very diverse outlook to the things in the market. There's been a lot of like they've had filters which like engage users to do yellow blackface, and that is terrifying that they have put them out there in the market without any critical reflection. And I'm hoping they're working on that right now, but that has just shown that their design teams have not been very diverse, because they haven't checked it. They have worked entirely based on their own biases. And as designers, if we are bringing in a spectrum of human skills and ranges and experiences, maybe our design industry should reflect that also. if we are designing for a very contemporary world, if you're designing for people who come from all walks of life, who live in Norway, people from everywhere, from various experiences, genders, age, race, language abilities, maybe some of that should reflect in the teams who are designing for these services, especially in the services. I mean, if I have an international bank card, and it doesn't work on the local public transport app here, and if I'm a tourist, how am I going to navigate? Or if I'm a new I'm an immigrant who's just moved in, how do I navigate? How do I access public services? Things like that. It is good to again ask the right questions, and ask questions. Always recheck anything that you're adding in, like if you're throwing out word, who is it catering to and who is it not catering to?
Yeah, exactly.
What and what not, what is working and what is not working, and what if the thing that is not working is huge problem. That need to be prioritized.
Yeah. Oh, great last words. Our producer at Youngstorget, Jonas, could you maybe bring up some questions on the screen, or should I just read them? Oh, there we go.
Yeah, there it is.
Frida, you mentioned, the scooters.
Yeah, actually, as I was doing this project, this was last spring. So it was actually when Voi launched their scooters, and I was sitting at the Blindforbundet, and it's awful. It's because you are making the city more unavailable than than it's already is.
Yeah.
And it's so bad for so many people, and it annoys me so much that we are using so much energy to create a good solution with good buildings and streets, and then we are then making them more unavailable with stuff that we have designed so well. And then we have something from the outside that is making it worse. Also, I'm not a big fan of these scooters. I'm sorry.
And we're still working with Blindeforbundet, and we can safely say that they're not very happy about the scooters either.
No.
They actually have a campaign, hashtag #TillHinder, for everyone that's interested. They are the stickers that they keep sticking on different scooters that are totally making it very hard to move around as a visually impaired person. You have another question, Jonas? Yeah. How much research did you do testing on the public in your work?
Is this questions to me, or?
I think so.
Probably. I think so. It was an early question.
Yes. So what I did early in, I was collecting a lot of research, and then I started to, one thought I had in my mind that I was supposed to use these support functions, like voiceovers and haptic feedback. I wanted to have this as main functions in my services. So I actually started designing stuff, and I thought, okay, this has to be the thing. This has a cool tone of voice, and I thought I really had done a good job. And then I did go to this mobility center, and I asked what people thought about it, and it was terrible. So I had to sort of start over, but it was super valuable. So I did a lot of testing with sort of more mapping out what didn't work, and then sort of look at, okay, what can we actually do, and what do actually people need to get solved. So I have learned the hard way, and
we had a quick little follow-up on the scooter question. Do you use scooters yourself?
No, I have never tried them.
Okay. Do you have another question, Jonas? I think you do. Okay, I heard someone was denied ordering at a bar because they did not have a phone to order using the bar apps. What are your thoughts on forcing people to pay using sometimes inaccessible technology?
this is a really good comment, and of course it's sort of hard because it is a reason why it's happening, why people should order from their phones. But
Yeah.
for sure, and I'm not sure about how accessible these apps are today. And
Yeah.
So
I mean,
Yeah,
Yeah,
some of them use like QR scanners, I think, and then
Yes,
you go
a lot of
to a
them.
browser.
yeah, but that I've also noticed that on some phones they don't work.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
and obviously you can't go to the basically and order them because you're trying to maintain social distancing with COVID and all of that. But there has to be a little more thought process, which has to go into device services and ways of ordering at a restaurant or at a bar, which does not heavily rely on a very solid phone. What that is, we don't has to be tested. There must be ways around it, but this has been a quick fix solution, which hasn't, which has been thrown out into the market to get restaurants up and running, I assume. But definitely, it needs to be reevaluated.
Yeah,
And in
and
general, it's probably a horrible idea to force people to use one specific technology. Like, I don't know, remember, I don't have the numbers in my head, but I'm guessing that a significant amount of Norwegian people and definitely people around the world don't have a smartphone.
Yeah, and it should be other touch points being evaluated. It doesn't need, as you are saying, it doesn't need to be a phone. It could be some other technology or not technology that we can use.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be technology. It can be something analog. Can be something analog. What that can be, we don't know yet, but there are definitely ways around it, simpler ways around it potentially, and safer ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We could have these tin cans with you remember when we were kids? These tin cans with you have another question, Jonas?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Pakuri.
No.
Okay, how can we ensure that we recruit, involve a diverse range of users with varying abilities in our work? Is this easier, more difficult now that we're meeting? Yeah,
more
I can't
online.
see the rest of it. Yeah, more online. Yeah.
Maybe I can try and answer that. I mean, obviously, on its as a platform is exclusionary. It also is inclusionary for some reasons, and it's exclusionary for others. It's inclusive for people who can't physically be present, and they can engage with things happening around them without leaving the safe haven of their home, but as long as they have good internet. And I think life we've been doing that recently. It is difficult, but not any more than it would be in any other way. I think the idea here is to first map out all your user groups and include everyone, and then recruiting them is a challenge because of the current situation that we are in. It is definitely possible to we have to curate the way we test, we undertake user tests. We've been doing that a lot in NetLife. Since we've gone virtual, we've had a lot of users across various projects, which has happened through online channels, and we've developed it as a methodology over the course of the last few months, and it is we learn from every experience. So it is challenging, it is difficult, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't happen.
Yeah, I had one comment because like we have to think differently of how we are. This is not only for the corona and where we are at now, but like when you are working with different user groups, you might have to look at different way of facilitating workshops and doing user testing. But this is just fun and creative methods to explore more with.
Yeah.
We have another question for you, Pankuri, from Innovating with People. How come designing with people?
This was the last question.
Yeah, that was the last one. I have another one here. How come designing with people is messy and cost more? I just read it from you once.
Yeah, I mean, it is obviously, if you when you are planning a project, inclusive design methods have to be planned within the of your project. That means, like, following up on the previous question, that might mean engaging, recruiting, and finding more users who are on the far end of your user group, who are they call leading users, who've got very specific abilities and or disabilities, and accessing that kind of network, accessing those groups in the right manner, ensuring GDPR compliance, ensuring that they are protected and they're, especially with vulnerable groups, they are taken care of. This is a long winded process. And it is worth it, because at the end you are ensuring that whatever you design and put out in the world is compliant and catering to them. But it is a little extra time in it at the beginning, which is why it hasn't happened very often, which is why, because they're always, especially with public services, there's a time crunch, there is limitation of resources, there's never enough time to plan for everything. So you usually have like a sample size group, you test it on them a couple of times, and you put it out there in the market, and then you develop it as it moves forward. But with some services and with some product, you can't undo the damage that you have already done because you haven't considered them. And then you have backlash, you have unhappy people. So that is why figuring this out and considering all these user perspectives and considering these groups and putting in the hard work and working with design methods and workshops, which caters, which expands your horizons as to who are you designing for, is extra time and money and investment, which is why it is very often not done. But the return of interest, if I may say so, is a lot. The return on investment is a lot here, because you are ensuring that these people are being seen and they are being responded to, and that means there is a slightly more loyal, regular using customer base for you as a service.
I have another question for the both of you, since we still have some minutes here.
Sure.
It may be a question that a lot of people are thinking about, but maybe a bit hard to answer on stående fot. Are there any projects, companies, or services that you've seen recently that are shining examples of good inclusive design? A question from Matt. So a good example.
Yeah, a good question.
Well, I have an example. This was something I came across during my PhD. There is a tick box, and I vaguely remember it. It was designed by two students in Edinburgh. It's called Skoog, which is a musical meant for children with, if I remember correctly, motor disabilities, and they have designed it to make it accessible as technology online, and now it's available on the App Store. And that was initially designed as an instrument to cater to children with, I think, was it dyslexia or with some kind of motor and cognitive disabilities. And now it has expanded it, so now it's an inclusive music instrument which works with Apple Play, and children have bands and they practice music and they sing together. And it was developed initially as a product, so it was product design, and now it has evolved into a much bigger service where they've got a platform for children to engage with Skoog, and it is available. It is funded, given to institutions which work with children with impairment. And it was designed as something else at the beginning, but it has developed over time. And I think that is one of the most inspiring products and / services that I came across in the last couple of years, because it was a product which is designed for children with children and actually does work. And it's something they enjoy a lot. So it's a little, feels good. It feels nice to see something like that out there in the world.
Have you thought of any, Frida, or?
No, it's too hard for me to.
I could sneak in. Yeah, no, I can sneak in an example of Utlendingsnemnda, which we worked for a couple of years ago, which I was very impressed of doing their site in a lot of different languages, and doing a lot of content in a lot of different languages is very hard and very a lot of work. But of course, it's a selvfølge, as we say in Norwegian, that kind of sites absolutely have a lot of content in a lot of languages, but I know it's a hard job to get right. We have the time for a couple of more questions. Hi, Pankuri, do you have some good ideas to how we might design for people with digital illiteracy? For example, elderly people. From Anne Ro.
Do I have some good ideas? I think in order to obviously think about designing for digital illiteracy, you can just call it literacy, which is analog. And maybe this would on the top of my head, I could think of methods like shadowing, like Frida said, a day in the life of phenomenology diaries, where you are at good participant at not where you engage with their lives and see how they live and function. Because my grandfather, for example, he lives in a small town in India. He still go to an ATM. He Where the whole world has gone on to mobile banking, even in India, he still runs his life without the internet. He doesn't do it at all, and that is not affecting his life in any way. He has been excluded, which is something that I can sense, but he doesn't see it that way. So he's an empowered user, and in order to see how they to recognize them as empowered users, we need to understand what are their workarounds. How are they engaging with life with limited digital literacy? So before beginning to design a project for them, maybe a good idea would be to see how they live, how they engage with services every day. What are their trips and tricks and workarounds, and what is their experience as a person who doesn't engage with a lot of digital literacy, with a lot of digital services, but still works, lives their life in a seemingly digital world. That is just something that I can think of on the top of my head. But that's a very interesting question, and I can maybe find out a little more and respond to that post Fagprat on YouTube if the person who's asked the question is not satisfied.
I think we have time for one last question from Kaya. Any tips on how to ensure that everyone is on board and enthusiastic about user involvement and inclusive design? So how to win over your colleagues with inclusive design, and how to get everyone on board?
Scare them.
With what? With like sanctions from
with concept? No, I'm just joking. But I think representing narratives in cases of good inclusive design services, of things that have made a difference because the inclusive, might be a good idea to creating a more positive narrative around why inclusive design is good as a design practice. It's good for the business. Reading up a little bit more. I think if I correct me wrong, Ara, but we are after this Fagprat, we'll send across a list of books and blogs and information which is available out there to develop an understanding of the field. Just finding examples. Maybe have the disgruntled user hat on when something doesn't work, and try and be a little more reflective as a designer about why this specific service or product is not working, or is not doing what it's supposed to do. And then the more you do that, you probably end up realizing that if we want to live in a world which includes us, we need to be inclusive designers so that others are not excluded.
Yeah, that's a good remark. We have time for a last remark here from Marcus. He says that OXO kitchen equipment are designed for people with arthritis and are very popular because they're so comfortable to use for everyone. So he had a interesting example for these things.
Yeah.
As you said, Pankuri will share a list of books and blogs and reading for everyone that wants to read up on this. We'll share it on Facebook, and we'll probably also share it on the meetup on our channel there. I also wanted to say that we actually find this very important issue, and you'll have a free webinar, Pankuri, the 10th of September, is it?
Yeah. Yes.
Diving deeper into this for everyone. Just check out our website, netlife.com, go in på kurs og konferanser, and you'll find the webinar there. I could also shoot in that we're our big conference Y-konferansen is also still happening. Obviously not physical, because we can't put 1,000 people in one tent at the moment. And unfortunately, I don't think that's fixed in October. But we'll do an amazing digital event for a cheap $1, and then you'll be included in the Slack community, and you'll get to see a lot of international speakers talk. So I know that's going to be great as well for you if you want to check out broader design and technology topics. And we'll have a new Fagprat the end of September. Be sure to check it out. We'll also notify you on Facebook and Meetup for that. And don't hesitate to send us questions on email or wherever you find us if you have any more questions on the subject. So thank you very much. Thank you, Pankuri. Thank you, Frida.
Cheers.